Hello everyone, today I will be discussing and showing you how to use if statements and switch statements in your MATLAB. If you're a little bit curious why my MATLAB may look a little bit different than you, on the first video I explained how to use the layout stuff. You can customize your windows. So for consistency, this is my current folder, my workspace, my command window, and my editor window. So it might look a little bit different for you. This is just how I personally like to have it. On the previous video, we explained how to use variables and the workspace. Now we're going to be creating more proper code that has some type of structure and ways for you to control that structure. So what do I mean by that? So for example, let's start with a really basic example. Let's say that I have a number and it can be any value. Let's say, for example, right now 1. And I want some code that tells me whether this value is positive, negative, or 0. And I want the script to tell me if this number is positive, negative, or 0. So now there's a very important keyword right there, and I said if. I want you to tell me if it's positive, negative, or 0. And that's where if statements comes in. So what is an if statement? If statements allow you to execute different code depending on a condition. So for example, let's say that I write in something like this. If x is larger than 0, display the values positive end. So now I'm going to run this and we're going to see what happens. So as you can see, it declared my x, and in my command window, it printed that. So what is going on here? So first we're setting x to be 1. When it reaches here, your if statement will check this condition. What is a condition? A condition is either a true or a false. In this case, it will see if my condition is true or false. In this case, it's checking is x larger than 0? And as I mentioned before, x is 1. So we know that this condition is true. So remember, a condition is either a true or a false. In this case, our condition is x larger than 0. Whenever we have a true condition on an if statement, it means execute the code in between. So this is our if statement start, and this is our if statement end. So only when x is larger than 0 will be displayed the value is positive. So now what does this mean? We can also do something similar. So I'm going to copy paste this. And now I will check if x is less than 0. And I'm going to be changing this to negative. So before I run this, let's think a little bit on what's going to happen. Your MATLAB reads code from the top to the bottom. So it reads it like a book. So first, it's going to declare for x to be 1. Next, it will run this if statement. It will check if this condition is true. In this case, the condition is x larger than 0. In this case, we know that 1 is larger than 0. So it's going to run the code in between here. We use the if to declare where the if statement begins. We use the keyword end to declare where the if statement ends. So this code right here will only run when x is larger than 0. After it's done with this if statement, it's going to execute this code right here. In this case, our condition is x less than 0. And again, we know that x is positive, so we know this condition will return false. Whenever we have a false condition, it will not execute this. So it will jump from line 7 and immediately skip everything in between. So let's see this in action. So if I click run, as you can see, it ran my code and it only printed the values positive. This code right here gets skipped because this condition is false. So let's try changing this value. Let's change it to -1. So now in this case, our conditions are flipped now. Now x is no longer larger than 0, so this is going to be false. So this code right here will not run. And now we know that -1 is less than 0. So we know that this code should run. And we can test it. So I'm going to click run. And as you can see, now it's only printing the value is negative. This code is no longer running. So if statements are very useful. This is probably the basis of the way for you to structure code. And this is just a very basic if statement. What do I mean with basic? What if I were to tell you that we can combine these two statements into one? How do we do that? Using what is known as an else if. So as you can see, it's marked blue because I brought in a keyword. What is an else if? If this condition returns false, it will hop into the next else if and see if that condition is true. So I'm going to simply write this really quickly. And I'm just going to copy paste this value over here, this code. So this is how MATLAB will read this. It will start from the top. X will be -1. It will start right here because again, MATLAB reads top to bottom. So it will check, is X larger than 0? We know that since X is -1, this condition is false. If this condition is false, it will hop into the next else if and check this condition. So now it will check, is X less than 0? In this case, we know that is true. So this code will be executed. And now here's an important aspect about if statements. Only one of these blocks will run. So I'm going to click run. And as you can see, only this code ran. If I were to change this again to 1, now it's telling me it's positive. Only this code ran. So now I'm going to do a little bit of an extra twist to this. Let's say that instead of checking if it's negative, I check if it's larger than 5. So I'm going to change this from negative. I'm going to change this to larger than 5. And I'm going to set my x value to 10. So now I want you to think and tell me, what do you think is going to happen? So let's set up a little bit hypothesis. So we know that x is larger than x, sorry. So we know that x is equal to 10. So again, MATLAB reads from top to bottom. So first it will declare x. So now it will execute this first condition. It will check, is x larger than 0? We know that since x is 10, this condition is true. So it will display this value is positive. But again, this is where the catch comes in. Whenever you have these blocks, only one is going to be executed. So once it runs this value is positive, it's going to skip the rest and go directly to the ending. So for example, end of script. And now you may be thinking, well, I know that if x is 10, and I know that 10 is larger than 5, so shouldn't it also run this? But if I click run, as you can see, it's not running this part right here. Because as I said, only one of these blocks will ever be executed. If a condition returns true, it will ignore any preceding else if value. So if we wanted something like this, in this case, we would have to separate it. I'm just going to copy paste this line right here. And so now if I run this, as you can see, now both are being printed. And let me just remove this. So now because each one is now a separate if statement, it will do each one individually. So do keep that in mind. And it's something that typically I see students get a little bit confused, is understanding how these if statements have, and we can call them maybe priorities. That's not a proper term, but for right now, let's go to priorities. So I'm going to go back to how I had it before. I'm just going to undo. Since this if statement, so this is one huge if statement right here. Since this first condition is at the very top, this one will have top priority. This one will have second top priority. And we can create as many else ifs as we want. So for example, I can do is x less than 0. So I'm going to just copy paste this real quick. So this one has top priority, second most priority, third most priority. Only one of these blocks will ever run. Only one, never two. So if I click run again, as you can see, only the positive one ran. If I were to change this as negative, again, I want you to predict what would happen. So pause the video and see what exactly should be printed. So I'm going to click run. So now as you can see, only this one ran. So make sure you're using your if statements properly. And I do suggest for you to probably try to mess with them a little bit more. For right now, I would like for you to, I'm just introducing them. So right now there's not a lot to talk about them. But once you're done with the first unit in class, you will see that if statements will be showing up a lot more. One last thing I forgot to note about if statements is that you can also create an else. For example, let's say that I want to, let me just remove this. So as I said before, I wanted to see if a value is positive, negative, or 0. So this will run if the number is positive. This will run if the number is negative. So there's only one last possible thing that x could be that doesn't match these two conditions, and it will be 0. So I'm just going to copy paste this line real quick, and I'm going to change it to 0. What this else statement means is that if all the other conditions are false and only if every single one of them and only if every single one of them is false, then run what's inside here. So I'm going to click run, and as you can see, because this condition returned false and this condition returned false, only then this will be displayed. So let me change it back to 1. And as you can see right here, since this condition is true, this doesn't run and this doesn't run because the top one has more priority. Once it matches, once a condition is true in an if statement, it will automatically skip everything else and head to the following end. So if statements is a very easy way for you to create logic in your code. You get to decide what code gets executed depending on a condition. And again, to recap, a condition is either a true or a false. So another thing I would like to show you is the switch statement. So what is a switch statement? I'm going to be removing this. In order to create a switch statement, all you have to do is type in the word switch, and then to close it, you create end. Oops. So switch statements allow you to execute certain amount of codes based on a value. So for example, let's say that our value is x. In here, I can say, in the case that x is 1, display the value is 1. And you can create as many cases as you want. If the case that it's 2, we can say the value is 2. And just like with if statements where we can do if else, switch statements have a otherwise. Otherwise. So I can display the value is not 1 or 2. And look at what happens when I click run. It's printing the value is 1 because it starts off here, x is equal to 1. You're telling MATLAB to select case based on value x. So in the case that x is 1, run this code. In the case that x is 2, run this code. If it's not either any of the other cases, then do this code. The truth is, you're probably not going to be using switch statements a lot in this course, but it's still something that I would like to just do a very quick introduction. The more important one is for you to focus on how to use if statements. So today I just used a very basic example because as I said, I want this to be a little bit more introductory. I do suggest for you in your own time to play around with if statements and see what type of logic you can create. So you can, for example, run certain codes if a value is positive, if a value is negative, or if a value matches something else. And that is it for this video. So hopefully this helped you. If not, you can always ask your professor or you can access the tutoring center. The tutoring center does help you with engineering classes, including numerical methods. Thank you for watching and goodbye.